Well, our US correspondent James Matthews has our first report tonight on America's attacks.
They attacked in the dead of night. These pictures from Isfahan capture the sight and sound of the US assault on Iranian nuclear sites. It was the biggest decision of Donald Trump's presidency so far, and his biggest gamble. They called it Operation Midnight Hammer, as seen in the Situation Room. This was how it looked on Saturday night. This was how it sounded on Sunday morning in a Pentagon briefing.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program.
New details revealed a US deception plan that had sent B-2 bombers flying west as decoys, while the B-2s involved flew east towards Iran, with bunker buster bombs primed and ready. As the president made a Saturday night return to the White House, 7 B-2 bombers had Iranian nuclear facilities in their sights. They included Fordo. It's believed to be Iran's main nuclear enrichment site, deep underneath a mountain. MOP bombs, massive ordnance penetrators, were deployed here. Other locations were hit at Naranz and Isfahan. US nuclear submarines fired Tomahawk missiles.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
The president spoke of total obliteration. His top military man revised that downwards, pending full damage assessment.
All 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft.
After the strike, the Americans said this was about peace and ending Iran's ambitions to build a nuclear bomb. Nothing more.
But our view has been very clear that we don't want a regime change. We do not want to protract this or build this out any more than it's already been built out. We want to end their nuclear program, and then we want to talk to the Iranians about a long-term settlement here.
While the Trump administration urged Iran back to the negotiating table, Iran's foreign minister said the door on diplomacy had closed.
The warmongering and lawless administration in Washington is solely and fully responsible for the dangerous consequences and far-reaching implications of its act of aggression.
After the American attack, strikes continued in Iran through Sunday, conducted by Israel. Its prime minister emboldened by a US ally joining the fight.
His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
This is a conflict with many moving parts, moving civilians to fear for the future.
Neither party are telling the truth about whether there has been contamination as a result of the strike. The task is not to allow this region to turn into another Chernobyl. I think the war is going to expand, even though people here in Tehran say it is going to end. I think the government may close the Strait of Hormuz.
Attacking Iran is an intervention by an American president with unpredictable consequences. The US says it's in touch with Tehran, privately and publicly, giving it every opportunity to come to the table for talks and for peace. If this momentous decision has been criticized internationally, it has been domestically too. Many in the MAGA movement, which put Donald Trump in power, are unhappy at his engagement in a foreign conflict. Many in Congress are unhappy that he didn't inform them first. A world that waited for America to strike now waits for Iran to strike back. The United States has spoken of an attack of precision and certainty. Neither applies to what comes next. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
Now, we've got some developing and breaking news coming into us. We've been hearing from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who held a Cobra meeting today, but we've also now got a statement from the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. He says Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. The US has taken action to alleviate the threat that would pose to the global community. And then he points out the UK did not participate in these strikes. We urge Iran to show restraint and reach a diplomatic solution to end this crisis. Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. He repeats that. And then he says the US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. He said, I've spoken today with my counterparts in Iran and Israel to stress the need for de-escalation. I urged a diplomatic negotiated solution to end this crisis. So we continue to see this very fine line that the British government is currently walking. On the one hand, supporting the US and the US president in the actions that they've taken overnight and reiterating that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon. And then on the other hand, making it quite clear and sending a very clear message to the Iranians that the UK had nothing to do with these strikes, because, of course, there is now great concern about retaliation from the Iranians. Will US bases and military assets be hit? Will the bases and military assets of the allies like Britain, France and Germany be hit here in the region, especially in places like the Gulf, Iraq, for example? And so there is great concern right now around that. So we are seeing these lines come through from the likes of the Prime Minister and now David Lammy saying that the UK did not participate in these strikes. Now, in the last few minutes, we've also heard again from Donald Trump. He first came out at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the UK time, about 5 o'clock in the morning where I am here in Jerusalem, and 10 p.m. late in the night in Washington, D.C., after watching the events in the Situation Room, watching those strikes take place, and you're looking at those images now, he addressed the nation. He talked about the fact that this was a successful operation. He's now reiterated that. He said that it was a spectacular military success yesterday, taking the bomb right out of Iran's hands. So that's Donald Trump saying yesterday things like Fordo is finished, for example, and describing the operation as amazing and successful. He's now said that the operation was a spectacular military success yesterday, taking bomb right out of Iran's hands. We've also heard in the last few hours from Iranian officials, one of the chief negotiators of the nuclear deal, Ali Shamkhani, who said the game is not over, and talked about the fact that Iran still has its nuclear enrichment program intact, which is something that we've been hearing from the Iranians a lot. So just some statements there from the Foreign Secretary as well as Donald Trump. Now, the US Defense Secretary was clear. The strikes had devastated the Iranian nuclear program, but Tehran has denied it suffered a major blow. The world's nuclear watchdog says it has detected no increases in radiation from the three sites, which may indicate that nuclear material had already been moved. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, looks at the damage done by the US strikes.
It was a massive display of force and a series of firsts. The largest ever operational deployment of American B-2 bombers, armed for the first time with 14 of these, its most powerful bunker-busting bombs. Operation Midnight Hammer involved 7 B-2 bombers, 125 warplanes in total, as well as warships and submarines that hurled as many as 75 precision weapons at Iran's nuclear facilities in just 25 minutes. The Pentagon saying the first B-2 dropped its massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP, in the early hours of the morning.
As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas.
One was Natanz, Iran's largest uranium enrichment facility, already damaged by Israeli raids last week. But the toughest target was Fordo, believed to be Iran's most sophisticated uranium enrichment plant, 60 miles south of Tehran, built in tunnels shielded by 80 metres of mountain above. beyond the reach of even a 13-ton bunker buster bomb, but not perhaps 12 of them. In this satellite image from before the attack, you can see Fordo's security perimeter and 3 tunnel entrances. Compare that to after the strike, these grey areas, presumably dust and debris from the attack zone here. Take a closer look. This was the mountainside before the raid, and here you can see 2 distinct strike zones, each hit with at least 3 bombs. Analysts suggest these details may be ventilation shafts, potential weak points chosen so the bombs carried their explosive payload as deep as possible. So was Donald Trump right to claim Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated? Evidence suggests otherwise. Satellite images support Iran's claims that it removed highly enriched uranium and equipment from Fordo before the attack and filled in its tunnel entrances.
Trump's statement that the whole thing has been obliterated implies that, yes, Fordo might have been, but the actual material, certainly the knowledge and many enrichment machines have been moved, and hence that may be a setback for a few months, but it certainly has not wiped out their capability.
The real impact on Iran's nuclear ambitions won't be known until the dust from this assault has settled. And given the number of bombs America just dropped, that could be some time. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Let's bring in Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who joins me now live on the phone. Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much for joining us. You know, over the years, you and I have spoken and you've been incredibly critical of Donald Trump. I just want to get your reaction to how things have unfolded, not just throughout the week, but especially over the course of the last 24 hours.
Well, I think Trump made the right decision for the United States in attacking the Iranian nuclear weapons program. I thought we should have done this for many years ago, up to 20 years, maybe even more. But it's better that it comes now than not at all or too late. I do think that there's plenty of work to do. I don't think anybody really believes that it's over on day one, and I think part of the problem that remains was caused precisely by Donald Trump agreeing to 60 days of negotiation with the Ayatollah Khamenei, during which time the regime, duplicitous as ever, was moving whatever it could out of places like Natanz and Esfahan and Fordo. So negotiation time is always on the side of the nuclear proliferator, and that appears to be proven here again today.
Big questions being asked about the day after and whether Donald Trump asked those questions and whether he got the response that he wanted. I'm currently here in Israel speaking to Israeli officials, and they did question the idea of Donald Trump not wanting this to be a prolonged war that, goes into him asking, well, what happens in a year? He wants to know what happens the day after, the week after, because he doesn't necessarily want to drag the United States into a war that breaks out in the Middle East. But do you feel that perhaps the United States is already in it?
Well, I don't think it's because Donald Trump doesn't want a long war that he asks the questions you've described. It's because he has a short attention span. And the fact is, if you're determined to destroy the nuclear program, which I think is the right thing to do, anybody else would understand that it may take more time. I personally think there are other objectives. I think that the only potential foundation for lasting peace and security in the Middle East is the overthrow of the Ayatollahs, which Trump has already said is not one of his objectives. I think it should be.
But is that wishful thinking? Because whatever we think about in terms of how Iran has perhaps miscalculated the last week, or it's more vulnerable, or it's weakened, it is a serious player. It's still a serious state. And this regime is deeply embedded and ingrained. No matter how corrupt or brutal or oppressive it may be, it is the regime of Iran. And should it not be up to the Iranian people to decide that?
Well, I'm counting on the Iranian people. I think this regime is at the weakest point it's ever been since the revolution of 1979. I think things like economic dissatisfaction, going back to the riots, which took place all over the country in 2018 and 2019, The young people who constitute 60% of the population is under 30. The young people know they can have a different way of life than under the Ayatollahs. They can see it right across the Gulf in places like Abu Dhabi and Doha and Dubai. The ethnic groups, the Azeris, the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Arabs, all very dissatisfied with the Ayatollahs. And going back to 2 years ago with the demonstrations that occurred after the Masi Amini murder, a young Kurdish woman who violated the dress code, this reflects the 50% of the population that's female, very unhappy, not just with the dress code, but with the whole idea, the whole legitimacy of the regime, that the Ayatollahs speak the word of God, not on dress codes, apparently. So I think this regime is vulnerable, and now they face a very, very hard decision that could fragment both the military and the Ayatollahs, which is how do they respond to the U.S. attacks on the nuclear sites.
Do you think, just as the phrase mission accomplished went on to haunt George W. Bush after the invasion of Iraq, the idea of one and done may haunt this administration?
Well, it won't haunt me. Mission accomplished was right on Iraq because the main mission was the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and that worked. I don't think Trump has exactly said one and done.
But the state of Iraq went into total disarray. We saw the dismantling of the Ba'athist Party. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go into the history of Iraq, but then we saw what
the American strategic objective. Yeah, the American strategic objective was the overthrow of Saddam Hussein and the elimination of any possibility Iraq could resume the search for weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological, and that happened.
Well, there weren't any nuclear weapons, and that's the question here. That
but this is, yes, here's a very important point. I'm glad you raised that. I'm very glad you raised that because today, people who oppose the American attack are saying, but you can't eliminate the knowledge that the Iranian scientists have. That is exactly right. And that is precisely the concern that the Bush administration had on the nuclear front with Saddam Hussein, who after the first Gulf War, when it was found he was much further advanced on nuclear weapons than anybody had expected, kept together 3,000 nuclear scientists and technicians that he called his nuclear mujahideen, who could rebuild the Iraqi program. That's why his regime had to be overthrown, and it's why this regime has to be overthrown.
So are you saying then that what you see is a prolonged American approach to this, where they just continue to strike, on Iranian targets, something that was perhaps a red line before, that's gone?
Well, I have no idea what Donald Trump is going to do. His objective was to get on leading the right parade. He wanted to make sure he was on the prevailing side because, as we know, Donald Trump is always a winner. What he'll do tomorrow is anybody's guess.
Ambassador Bolton, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get the take now from our correspondents across the world on what could happen next. Our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington for us. Cordelia Lynch is in Tel Aviv. Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey is live in Erbil in northern Iraq for us. And Ivor Bennett joins us from Moscow. But let's go to Mark first, because Mark, you and I were up. We've been up for about 24 hours or so covering this news when it first happened. But the big question now, two things, what the battle damage assessment of this is, because already we're hearing a lot of pushback from the Iranians saying the game isn't over, everything is intact, and they didn't do the damage that we expected it to do. So big questions now about what next.
Yeah, from Donald Trump's perspective, I think the word now is brace and await to see how Iran responds to this. I think there are two there were two key objectives that Donald Trump wanted to get out of what he hopes was an in and out, a one night of strikes and then job done. That's what he hopes. And the two key objectives are A, to remove Iran's nuclear capabilities, and B, to be able to pull Iran somehow back to the negotiating table without any prospect of Iran retaliating. Now, on both those points, a big gamble. And we heard what Donald Trump said in his address to the nation yesterday, where he basically said, we've done it. We've obliterated all of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Well, a few hours later at the Pentagon, it was a little bit more nuanced. And listening to the Vice President, J.D. Vance, on NBC this morning, also a bit more nuanced. It will take time. We may have destroyed the facilities, but the program, well, that might take a little bit longer. So you can see already how the narrative is shifting somewhat. And then on that second point, how to pull the Iranians now back to the negotiating table. Well, look at what the Iranian foreign minister said today. No chance at all. And how to prevent them or mitigate against any Iranian attack now against American assets. 40,000 troops in the region. You can see how this would spiral very, very quickly. If just a few American soldiers were to be killed in an Iranian attack on any one of those bases, especially if that base was in another country as well, which might draw that country in, you can see how it would all spiral. Donald Trump, there's a fine line between, being a genius when it comes to diplomacy and statecraft, and the other side of that line being very, very reckless. It's a very fine line. It's tricky to know at the moment which side of it he falls with this momentous decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. Let's bring in our Cordelia Lynch, who joins me live from Tel Aviv. And we are talking a lot, Cordy, about what has changed. But one thing that hasn't changed, certainly not since the last 9 or 10 days since Israel first launched those airstrikes on Iran, we've been seeing ballistic missiles flying overhead. And Iran did respond, and they responded harder than they have in previous days in the early hours of this morning.
Yes, and look, Israel believes that Iran's weaponry, its arsenal, has been significantly diminished, but it's uncertain. Before this war, it was estimated by Israeli officials that Iran had around 2,000 medium and short-range weapons. They think they've made a major dent in it. America concurred with that figure, but there is still a lot of options on the table. Yes, they were able to tackle some of the storage sites, some of the launchers as well, and that has reduced some of Iran's capacity. But some of the possibilities, some of the possible targets, as Mark said, they have a number of American troops in the region, those bases, critically, that it may choose to go after in the short term. It may choose to arm its proxy militias. It may choose to try and coordinate with the Houthi rebels, for instance, in Yemen. They also have attack drones that they might try to smuggle through Iraq. All these are possibilities, so they know they cannot overlook the threat. There has been a problem, some malfunctions with some of these missiles, and certainly it is Israel and America's calculation that the ability to deliver a huge barrage, a huge assault, is certainly less now, but Israel's interceptors are also under pressure.
Cordy, thank you so much. Let's go to our Stuart Ramsey, who joins me now from Erbil. And Stuart, we've been speaking throughout the day, certainly in the early hours of the morning, discussing how Iraq would respond. Iraq is, in this precarious position because on the one hand, it has the US bases on its soil. It also has good relations with the Iranians. And it's also had American bases and military assets targeted previously by the Shia militia, for example.
Yes, it's a bit of a one-off, isn't it, Iraq? And it finds itself right in the middle of all of this. I think the big question here going forward is Iran going to attack these American assets here and in Syria and other parts of the Gulf, as we've heard throughout this? And if they do so, it's been made clear to them by the United States that they will be attacked. Now, Iran has said they will do at some point. That's what people are waiting to see. Or will their proxies take up the baton for them and carry out attacks themselves? And I think that's been something that's been characterized today from what we've heard from the United States. It's an absolute clear to both Iran and to its proxies that America will go after them if they attack their assets. And also civilians, don't forget that that's been threatened as well, who are in the region. So that's really what we're looking at now. What is going to happen next? Will Iran attack? And then what will the American reaction be? And what we've heard from President Trump, that it will be very, very severe indeed.
Stuart, thank you so much. Let's go straight to Moscow and speak with our Ivor Bennett, who joins me now. And Ivor, looking forward now, we understand that the Iranian foreign minister is on his way to Moscow to meet with President Putin, a strong and staunch ally of Iran.
That's right, Yalda. Yeah, Russia's going to be watching this very closely and anxiously indeed, because, as you say, Iran is a key regional ally for Russia. The two countries signed this strategic partnership deal at the beginning of the year, and Iran's importance to Moscow increased massively following the toppling of the Assad regime in Syria last year. Russia lost a vital strategic ally there. They don't want the same thing to happen again today. So we expected a strong verbal response from them. We got that in the form of a statement from the Foreign Ministry today, which said it strongly condemns the attacks and called them a dangerous escalation. And some voices within Russia today are calling for Moscow to step in and help its partner out. At this stage, I don't think we're going to see that. If things stay as they are, it's a big if, of course, but if they stay as they are, I think Moscow's response is going to be limited to rhetoric. And I say that for a number of reasons. Firstly, this strategic partnership pact doesn't contain a mutual defence clause, so there's no obligation for them to provide military support to Tehran. And even if they did want to, or even supply weapons, the general consensus among analysts is that they'd be hard pushed to, because all of Russia's resources and focus right now is on Ukraine, of course. On top of that, Moscow is also right now pursuing warmer ties with Washington, and if they get involved with Iran, then of course that jeopardizes all that. Having said that, though, Moscow is very anxious indeed to avoid any further escalation. So Vladimir Putin has been pursuing a diplomatic resolution frantically this past week, and those efforts are going to continue tomorrow when he meets the Iranian foreign minister here in Moscow. And I think his aim will be to play the peacemaker. He will try to convince Tehran to limit their response, I think, to a symbolic one, hoping this is one and done from the US, hoping then that he can preserve Russia's interests in the region and potentially gain some leverage with Donald Trump. But it's a very, very big if, and a lot remains unpredictable.
Yeah, a lot of jeopardy. Ivor, Stuart, Cordy, Mark, thank you all for all of your analysis and updates there. I've just got some developing news and some lines coming in from Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, and I just want to update you on that. They say the nuclear sites were quickly being rebuilt, activity to continue with greater power. So that is Iranian media, and that's the Reuters news agency reporting that Iran's Atomic Energy Agency says the nuclear sites are being quickly rebuilt and activity is to continue with greater power. So pushback and defiance from Iran. We will be speaking to someone in Iran in a moment, but this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, coming up on the programme. As Iran responds by firing 40 missiles towards Israel, we'll get reaction to the US strikes from Tel Aviv. Also ahead, we'll get the latest on the Iranian response to the US attacks from a journalist in Tehran. And our political editor, Beth Rigby, will be taking a look at the British response to America's attack on Iran. Welcome back to the program. I'm Yalda Hakim. Now, Iran has warned that America's attack will have everlasting consequences. The US president has urged the Iranians to get back around the negotiating table, but Tehran has told Donald Trump it reserves all options to retaliate. So what might that retaliation look like? Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reports on Iran's options on how to respond.
President Trump has plunged the US into this war with probably the most extreme option he had available. So what happens next, and how likely is this conflict to expand further? Iran is almost certain to retaliate. Not doing so would make it look even weaker. So what could it target? The US has military bases throughout the Middle East: Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Killing Americans might be a priority for Iran to try and drive a wedge between Trump and his MAGA supporters back home, who say America is getting drawn into yet another Middle Eastern war, risking US lives. Iran could attack Americans directly with drones and missiles, or use proxies in the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been massively degraded by Israel. More likely, Iran would use militias it backs in Iraq, or the Houthis based in Yemen, whose truce with the US appears to be in tatters. All that would invite massive retaliation, of course, from America, so Iran might prefer asymmetrical options. In that case, Britain could also be a target. Could all this lead to terror attacks in the UK? In the region, there are two stretches of water to worry about, both strategically vital. The Houthis could threaten shipping in the Red Sea, while Iran could directly target vessels in the Persian Gulf, as they've done before, harassing ships with smaller boats, firing rockets at them and seizing them. Now, if the Gulf goes up in flames, expect a big hit to the global economy and the price of oil too. The Iranians have threatened to shut off the Strait of Hormuz, this choke point through which a third of the world's seaborne oil passes. All this would send shockwaves through the world's financial markets. The US has massively increased its presence to retaliate to any retaliation, with no less than 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the region. As things stand, this is almost certain to escalate, but could it also widen and suck other nations into the conflict? Russia and Iran have a strategic partnership agreement, but it doesn't require Moscow to come to Iran's support. Iran is also China's closest ally in the Middle East, but Beijing is also likely to sit this one out, it's thought, and watch from the sidelines. The priority for Iran's leadership is to survive, to fight another day, and redouble efforts eventually to build the bomb. If Israel can't change the regime in Iran, which isn't easy, it'll have to manage the Iranian threat and cut it down to size from time to time. That could mean years more military action and could be hugely costly for both Israel and its American backers. So Iran is in a very tight spot, but the future could be challenging for both Israel and America too.
That was Dominic Waghorn reporting there. Well, let's get the latest from inside Iran now. Journalist and senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies, Abbas Aslani, joins me now live from Tehran. Thank you very much, Mr. Aslani, for joining us here on the program. I just want to get your reaction and what the mood is like currently in Tehran since these strikes took place overnight.
Yalda, Iran was not caught by surprise when the United States attacked the nuclear facilities. For a few days, Tehran was expecting that, to happen. But the level of the aggression and the intensity was much less than what was expected. For sure, there has been damages to the nuclear facilities in, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. But the point is that this is not about the end game. But from Tehran's perspective, it is about setting the stage, a new stage and a new course. Yalda, Iran's nuclear program has 3 crucial components. One is the facilities and the equipment, like Fordo and centrifuges inside. The second is the nuclear material, and the third is the know-how or the knowledge. The first one, the nuclear facility seems to have been damaged. To what extent, that's yet the question. It is being investigated. We have to be waiting for further details on that. And because Iran was expecting this attack on the second component, which is the nuclear material, they have been relocated to a secure place. So Iran has been trying to keep them in a safe place that they are not destroyed and a contamination will not be happening. And the third is the know-how and the knowledge. And this is not, you cannot bomb a knowledge or the know-how. That's why Iran is insisting that even if there has been damage, but it could compensate and they can recover what has been taking place. For Iran, which has been facing pressure or sabotage acts in the past, there have been, similar incidents, but maybe in a smaller size, but they have been able to recover. That's why they are insisting that they will be able to develop at a faster pace.
And to that point, Abbas, the fact that they are now saying, and I just want to quote what Iran's, just a second, sorry, I'm going to find that for you. Iran's Atomic Energy Agency saying nuclear sites have been quickly rebuilt, activity to continue with greater power. That's according to Iranian media, and what we've been hearing Iranian officials reiterate, people like Ali Shamkhani, one of the chief negotiators, very close to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying this game is not over, everything is still intact. The fact that they're saying they've moved these, this material and the centrifuges and other things to other sites, do you believe that they are hoping to use it as part of leverage in future negotiations?
Iran wants to say, Yalda, that any pressure, any military, conflict, any military aggression will backfire. Not only Tehran will not scale down its nuclear activities, but it will scale it up. That's why Iran is using to keep those nuclear material in order to scale up its nuclear activities, number one. And the second, as you said, yes, they are going to use it as a leverage in any possible negotiations in future. Because what the United States and Israel meant to achieve from this military aggression, they wanted to, deprive Iran from those material to get more concessions from Tehran and to convince it to accept the zero enrichment. Because, nuclear industry as well as material, they are not just for technical use for just medical pharmaceuticals, but they can be used as an asset for, let's say, geopolitical or political tools in order to get concessions from the other side. And that's why the U.S. was insisting Iran not to have that, because Iran without enrichment could be a weaker Iran. That's why they did it and engaged in such kind of, act. And that's why Iran is insisting.
Abbas, I just want to ask you, because the concern now, and Western analysts are watching very carefully, is on two things. First of all, that Iran is going to retaliate, despite what Donald Trump and Israel says, that this is one and done. They weren't hitting the troops. They didn't hit civilians. These were nuclear facilities. Therefore, Iran shouldn't retaliate. So the question is then, will Iran retaliate, and what would that retaliation look like? Will it also include perhaps blocking the Strait of Hormuz, which would impact the global economy? And the other concern that Western analysts have is that this will now propel Iran to race to get the bomb. If they weren't thinking about it, in a sort of rushed way before, this will now compel them to do that.
Yalda, no response is not an option for Iran, because Iran has to respond against this aggression. Why? Tehran looks at this from two perspectives. One is that the aggression taking place against the nuclear facilities, the repercussions in terms of the non-proliferation treaty. Iran thinks that it has the right to enrichment and nuclear industry. But the second important point is that if Iran does not respond against that attack, this will be a kind of inviting further and additional attacks in future. So establishing a deterrence and a balance against those external threats coming, now and then in future, U.S. or Israel could target another place, another city in future, claiming that there has been suspicious nuclear activities, even if that's not the case. So Tehran wants to make sure that it can stop further and future likely attacks from a perspective of establishing a deterrence. But this response could include other aspects, which is being discussed in the parliament. It is withdrawing from the non-proliferation treaty. Iran has the lever of blocking or disrupting the transit of energy in the Strait of Hormuz. It could activate its regional allies to be actively engaged, and also in a more severe manner targeting Israeli assets as well as, American interests in the region. So
American
Iran
assets in the region, yeah. Unfortunately, Mr. Aslani, we have run out of time, but I'm grateful that you've joined us here on the program.
My pleasure, Yalda.
Thank you. Now, Iran's immediate response to the US attack involved firing more than 40 missiles towards Israel. Sirens blared in major cities and several buildings sustained extensive damage. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Donald Trump for his decision to strike Iran, saying it would change history. Well, Sky's Cordelia Lynch reports on what impact the strikes will have on Israel.
Glass-filled streets, scattered shrapnel, and the skeletons of homes. The people of Ramat Aviv woke with a shuddering jolt, and buildings decimated by an Iranian missile. Orly is picking up what little of her life she can.
I'm living in the apartment over the other side. The apartment itself is ruined totally.
These are images from inside. The attack wiping out nearly everything she owned. America has now got involved.
Yeah, I know.
How does that shift your view of this war?
I thought from the beginning that this is a justified war. I still think that. I hope it will make the war a little bit shorter. But other than that, it was a threat to Israel, and it's a threat that should be eliminated. And I hope it would be they will do it fast, because the suffering is very, very hard.
But there were no casualties. A community safely hunkered down in shelters, the new normal in Israel. Animals, not bodies, being pulled from the wreckage.
Are you surprised by the level of destruction?
Oh, yeah. I guess anyone would be surprised. It's not a nice thing to see, but lucky for us, it's only damage, no casualties.
Israel got the support of a superpower, the critical might of America's military. But that doesn't insulate it from further attacks.
When you're looking at number, Israel is doing an incredible job at intercepting the vast majority of those being targeted. But the point here isn't that there's rockets getting through. The point here is that there's rockets being fired at our civilian communities, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, here you can see up close homes completely destroyed. This is a residential neighborhood with a lot of apartment blocks, people's belongings here just hanging over the edge. And despite this intense level of destruction, what strikes you here is that so many people support what Israel is doing. They believe Benjamin Netanyahu needed to strike, and they welcome America's intervention. They hope and believe that might bring a quicker conclusion to this conflict.
It's not fear that hangs in the air in this neighborhood. It's hope, acceptance, and on the political stage, gratitude and platitudes.
Last night, President Donald Trump took a historic resolution, a resolution which can change the entire trajectory of the Middle East to a better future.
This may be a critical chapter, but it's not the epilogue of the story. It's a moving conflict between two well-armed enemies, both political outliers, one that could easily spill across the region, with millions caught in the crossfire. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
OK, let's take you straight to New York and the United Nations, where we are expecting the Security Council to meet shortly. Let's have a listen to Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon.
Iran's reach extends far beyond our borders. It arms militias in Iraq, it commands terror in Lebanon, it funds Houthis in Yemen, it plots murder in Europe, and it threatens every capital in the West with its growing arsenal of ballistic missiles. You cannot sit this one out. You cannot condemn the firefighters while the arsonist tries to light more fires. You cannot protect peace by appeasing evil. To the Iranian regime, understand this. Any further attacks against our civilians will be met with overpowering righteous force. Unlike your actions against our civilians, our strikes will continue to target military and nuclear facilities. We will defend our people. We will not hesitate. We will do everything necessary to secure our future. Thank you.
China Central Television. Just one very simple question. Do you think after this operation, Israel is safer now?
Absolutely. Not only Israel. I think the entire world is safer. You don't have a radical regime which threatens to destroy member states of the UN. And today I think we have a historic days.
Iran International. Now that the nuclear facilities were bombed, what's the next step for Israel? Are you going to continue targeting Islamic Republic inside Iran? And also, is there a regime change in the plan for Israel? Is Khamenei personally a target for Israel?
We have many targets still. And I think today the question should go to Iran. They should think very carefully about their steps. I think President Trump said it very clearly. Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear about it. They should calculate their steps. You know, regime change, you know, that's up to the Iranian people. I pray that there will be change for the people of Iran, but that's for the Iranian people to decide, not for us. Yeah.
Ambassador, excuse me.
Excuse me?
Any threats to Dimona by now, your nuclear side?
You know, we have very strong defense capabilities. We have proven it. The problem is that the Iranians, they target civilian cities, not military bases. Unfortunately, we have casualties.
Ambassador, what is your response to Secretary General Guterres, who issued a statement last night saying that he was, quote, alarmed by the U.S. Attacks on the nuclear facilities, and that only diplomacy is the answer to achieve peace?
It was very disappointing because the Secretary General failed to, in his remarks, to mention the threat of nuclear Iran. He knows better. He knows that diplomacy has failed for the last decades, and he should thank the U.S. for bringing stability and bringing peace through power. Please.
When did the United States tell Israel that it was going to go ahead with this bombing? And given that one of your stated aims has been to destroy the nuclear program, has enough damage now been done that Israel will stop its strikes on Iran?
So, you know, we have very close coordination with the United States throughout the last few days, before the attack, during the attack, and after the attack, and it will continue to be the same way. You know, I think still it's early to assess the attack, but we can tell you one thing, you know, the capability of the United States are the strongest one that you can find around the world, you know, especially if you compare it to Israel's one. So I think not only Israel, the entire world is grateful for the U.S. for this very impressive operation. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You were listening there. You were listening there to Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, and in the next 10 minutes or so, we are expecting that Emergency Security Council meeting to discuss the United States strike on Iran to take place. So we will be bringing that to you live as soon as it happens. But let's speak now to a member of the Israeli Knesset, Boaz Bismuth. Thank you very much, Mr. Bismuth, for joining us here on the program. We just heard there from Danny Danon. I just want to get your reaction to how things have developed over the course of the last day.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Listen, I listened to the reports that you gave from your reporter here in Tel Aviv, in Ramat Aviv, as you mentioned. And the fact, I mean, she seemed to be a bit surprised by the fact of the consensus of the people who, how would I say, support the Israeli attack over the nuclear plants in Iran and ballistic missiles. But you must understand the images that you have seen, if it concerns Iran, you wouldn't see one building or 10 buildings destroyed. You would see all of Israel destroyed. And you will not see a ballistic missile attack against Israel. You will see an atomic attack against Israel. And this is why today in Israel, whether you go to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, whether you see secular Orthodox Jews, whatever you see, they all support this attack. Now, it is true, it is obvious that the fact that America participated tonight and joined the attack against the plant in Purdue helped a lot Israelis, because I'll be honest with you, Israel would like this war, because it's a war. It's not a cycle of violence. It's not an operation. It's a war. We would like it to be the shortest possible for two reasons. First of all, because we don't like casualties against our civilians, A. And two, we have nothing against the Iranian people. This is why when Prime Minister declared only 15 minutes ago that we're obtaining the two goals of the war, which is A, of course, the nuclear plants, B, the ballistic missile threat to Israel, the fact that we're approaching those goals, is a very, very good announcement for the Israelis.
Mr. Bismuth,
Yes.
I've got about 2 minutes to go, and I just want to talk you through a few things, because, of course, President Trump has described this as a successful operation. Benjamin Netanyahu has done the same. Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, just in the last half an hour or so, says that the nuclear sites are being quickly rebuilt. Activity is to continue with greater power. Do you think that perhaps this idea of launching this attack on Iran and believing that this is just a one-and-done situation will actually come back to haunt Israel, the region, and the United States?
Well, I would say a very, very simply answer. If I had to choose between Israel and America's declarations and Iranian ones, past has proven that Iranians don't always, and they're very polite, don't always say the truth. The same way as the way the Iranians are speaking today for their peaceful, means and their face towards peace, which is totally, all the world knows exactly what is Iran. Since 1979, since the 2nd of February, when Ayatollah Khomeini landed in Tehran, we know exactly which direction this country, terrorism and nuclear plant. So believing what they say today is a bit naive, I would say.
Mr. Bismuth, we're really grateful for your time. I'm sorry it was short on time. We had to go to Danny Danon, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Well, you have been hearing reaction from the entire region, including the United States, about those attacks that the United States launched overnight. We will be following all the developments here. Do stay with us on Sky News. But for now, from me and the team, goodbye.